What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the Spaulding Media Network here on this fine Monday evening. Fuji's Phil is back at 8 p.m. Eastern Time here on this Monday evening, and we got a very exciting show tonight scheduled for the third episode of Fuji's Phil. Mike Fuji is joined today with three-time Super Bowl champion, a former broadcaster for CBS Sports as well, and a true legend in the NFL. Randy Cross has joined us here from the San Francisco 49ers dynasty he was a part of for many years. So we're excited to get to talk to him a little bit. Fuji, take it away, my friend.
Randy, thank you. Everybody tuning in tonight, thank you for coming on. We deeply appreciate it. Randy is on with us. He's just having a little problem with the camera. Randy, how are you tonight? Welcome to Fuji's Phil.
I'm doing great. I'm doing really good. It's not quite football season, but at least for a couple of weeks, it seems like it.
Exactly. Well, I mean, OTAs are voluntary, kicked off 3 days of the NFL draft. Just to dive right in, as far as that, I mean, what quarterbacks are you liking to come right out of college? I mean, if you were to pick one or two of your top list.
Well, obviously there's a heck of a lot of them in this draft. I mean, there's a good half a dozen that people think will have a shot at going in the first round. But the pick of the litter are the guys that everyone has sort of going up top with Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels and Drake May. Caleb had the Heisman in 22. Jaden had the Heisman in 23. Drake's a little bit different quarterback between the two. He's not quite as much of a movement guy, but then again, he's more of a statuesque type quarterback. I love personally two guys in this draft that I really like watching are Jaden Daniels and Michael Penix Jr.
Okay. As far as just turning it over to your San Francisco 49ers, I'm sure you may get this question a lot, but do you believe Brock Purdy is the man in San Francisco to win a Super Bowl with the 49ers?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think so. For all the people that are worrying about who's going to make trades to get to the 2 or who's going to make trades to get to the 3, you're pretty much guaranteed nobody's going to make a trade to get to Mr. Irrelevant. But San Francisco making that pick and coming up with a guy like that, Purdy's their guy for the next decade. And he plays like it. He looks like it. He performs like it. He's got about everything you want in a quarterback, and it's just so unusual. I mean, it hasn't been since the Pats and Brady in the 6th round that a team has gotten that lucky with a quarterback.
Right.
Randy, I wanna ask you in your draft experience. You were drafted in 76 in the second round, and the draft has changed a lot since 76. We've seen the draft expand to what it is today, which is kind of this must-watch television, this drama-filled event. I mean, how has your draft experience, how has that experience changed, and how have you seen it change over the years with other people's experience of getting drafted and seeing to what it is now? I mean, what was it like back in your day when you got drafted in 76?
Well, do you remember the old movie 2001: A Space Odyssey?
I do. Yeah.
Yeah. My draft experience were the cavemen and the obelisk. Compared to the space station, which is now. We didn't have the combine. The draft wasn't televised. The draft was barely, I think, even on the radio back then. They were just doing updates back then, radio wise, and no, completely different. I'm not saying it was inferior or worse, because a guy named Leroy Selman went number 2 in the year I was drafted, and he worked out pretty good. So I guess there's still been some football players from back then.
Yeah, and he went to a team that needed some help. I'm a Buccaneers fan, Randy, so I know all about Leroy Selman, although he was a little before my time a little bit. So,
hey, can you name the guy that went to Seattle?
Oh man, who was
At
the guy that
number
went to
one,
Seattle?
Jim,
I remember the name, but I forgot who it was. Who
Jim
is it?
Zorn.
no, it was a defensive lineman from Notre Dame. And I'm actually kind of drawing a blank, and I shouldn't. But yeah, it was wild because looking back on it, you're going, boy, somebody went before Leroy Selman. But
Right.
yeah, it was the draft back then was a different experience, but the scouting was about as in depth. I mean, I started getting scouted and talked to parts of my, around spring of my sophomore year. And then I ran into Gil Brandt, the late Gil Brandt, God bless his soul, great guy, amazing football guy. He came up to me at UCLA. It was my junior year during spring football. You always had the guys that were going to be drafted that year. That was kind of their combine in front of the scouts. And we had scouts from, I think, every team in the league was there. And we ran 40s and did all the drills and all this stuff. And I ran a really good 40, somewhere around 4.75, 4.8. And Gil Brandt came up to me and was giving me a bad time. He goes, your attitude's a little marginal. And I looked at him like, what? He goes, you act like you don't want to play football. I said, well, I am playing football. Why are you here? And he goes, no, I meant professional football. I said, well, to be honest with you, I really hadn't given it much thought. And he looked at me like I had three heads. And he goes, well, you might want to start thinking about it because you're going to go in the first or second round.
Randy, as far as looking back, who went number 2 from taken by the Seattle Seahawks, I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name right, Steve Niehaus?
Steve Niehaus, defensive tackle, All-American, all that other fun stuff.
Never realized Chuck Muncie and then Joe Washington went right after in that draft. Just thinking of a couple running backs from yesteryear.
Yeah. Trust me, those were fun guys to play in the All-Star games with. You didn't have to have great blocks for them to get by you.
Yeah, Randy, what was that when you got drafted? It was back-to-back UCLA picks. Cliff Frazier got taken ahead of you, and then it was you. So, what was that kind of like to see one of your teammates go ahead, and then obviously seeing you after? I mean, that must have been pretty cool to have one of your teammates in front of you, and then you got to be taken right after. That must have been pretty special to have UCLA guys going together.
It was fantastic. Cliff was an All-American nose tackle, and I was an All-American guard, and I had been called by Cleveland in the first round. They were picking 24th, and their offensive line coach used to be the head coach at the college right by where I grew up in the Valley in LA at Cal State Northridge, and a guy named Rod Humanek. And he called me up, and I'd been in some of his football camps, and he said, we're looking at making you the first round pick of the Cleveland Browns. And my reaction was, I kind of went, Cleveland, like in Ohio?
Wow.
Needless to say, that wasn't the reaction he was looking for. So they ended up taking Mike Pruitt out of Purdue, and everything worked out good for me, though. The Niners didn't have a first-round pick because they had traded for Jim Plunkett.
Oh, okay. We'll end up beating the Eagles in Super Bowl 15 a couple of years later.
Yep. Once Al Davis got a hold of him, gave him a year off after he spent 76, 77, and camp of 78, and then our GM fired him, cut him, and as soon as he cut him, Al Davis picked him up, and Al just told Jim, he goes, I know how good you are. You just get healthy. Just,
right.
I'm going to have you on the roster. You just get healthy. That's all you got to do, and paid off with a Super Bowl.
Randy, as far as going back to your time with the Niners, winning 3 Super Bowls, who would you say was the toughest defensive player you ever went up against?
As far as on my side, because on the other side we're a pretty impressive collection. My idol growing up was Merlin Olsen, and my rookie year, about the 4th or 5th game of the year, I got to play against Merlin in LA in Monday Night Football. That was really cool. Alan Page, a pretty amazing defensive tackle. But for the more current types, I would say it would have to be Joe Klecko and Steve McMichael, who here in back-to-back years have gone into the Hall of Fame. Both
Right.
sort of the same size guys, 6'2", about 285, 290, strong as hell, quicker than hell. Just really, really good defensive linemen.
As far as when you played right guard and you played center.
Mm-hmm.
What was it just like, playing under center under Joe Montana and, with Jerry Rice and those guys?
Yeah. I mean, when I came in the league, the guy that drafted me was a guy named Monty Clark, who would later be the head coach in Detroit. But he was the head coach with the Niners, and he had been the offensive line coach for Don Shula's Dolphin teams. And he wanted me to be a center. My senior, I played guard and center at college, but mainly guard. But my senior year, we had an offensive line where we had two offensive lines. And the first offensive line, I was the right guard. The second offensive line, I was the center. And he decided I was going to be a center. So I played center my first 2.5 years and my last year and a half. And the other 9, I was at guard.
Randy, looking at those years and being able to not only get to work with Joe Montana, but then you also have Steve Young on that team as well. I mean, at that point he wasn't starting. Joe was still, he was still the starter for those Niners teams. So at that moment, did you still see anything? Did you see anything out of Steve Young yet at that moment in his career where he was still kind of the backup at Joe before he stepped in and replaced Joe later on in those Niners dynasties? Did you see anything out of them early on in his career?
Yeah, I was with him my last couple of years. His first 2 years were 87 and 88. And he was my roommate in training camp and on the road. So I got to listen to, him say how, he really wanted to play and, how he wasn't getting an opportunity and stuff like that. I was also a little biased towards Joe, but Steve's game had not developed yet. Steve was an incredible athlete. People don't appreciate what a great runner, what a great athlete he was. And he could do that then, and he could still throw, but he hadn't mastered the offense yet. And, I think later on you got into the years like 90, 91 or so, it became much more obvious. The playoffs in 87, or during the season in 87, Bill kind of started, that's when Bill started messing with Joe. And that carried over into the next year. Because, it was pretty obvious we had two extremely good quarterbacks.
Randy, my bad, Fuji.
Oh, go ahead.
Randy, I wanted to touch base on what you said there a second ago. You said, obviously, Steve Young being a great athlete. You also yourself are a great athlete. You actually competed in shot put in high school in California. There was a piece that I saw, a noteworthy fact that I pulled up, that you ended up defeating Terry Albritton and Jim Neidhart. And I know WrestleMania was a few weeks ago in Philly, but what was that like, being able to really feel that success early at a young age and in your high school years, and obviously beating two guys who went on to have success in their own careers as well? I mean, what was that kind of that meet like, and being a part of that and working with in track and field?
Yeah, it was pretty cool, to be honest. Terry Albritton set the world record, I believe, right around our senior year in college. He just exploded. He was a big dude. Terry was 6'5", about 290, and not very fat at all. He'd been lifting since he was in the crib. So I beat him in the state finals my senior year. And Neidhart actually was at a different school, but there was a school, Newport Harbor High School in Newport Beach. And Terry was there with a guy named Mark Stevens. And Stevens had won the state the year before our junior year. And then Terry got second our senior year. And then Neidhart won the state the first year after we left.
Randy, as far as playing on all three Super Bowl teams, now if you had to pick one, which one would you have chosen that you thought was the best?
Well, it's I tell people all the time. It's kind of like I've got 3 kids too, so it's like picking
Right.
your favorite kid.
Right.
But the first one, there's always something special about the first one. The last one, the other one against Cincinnati was my last game, so that was actually pretty special too. But the best team I played on was that '84 team that beat Marino and the Dolphins at Stanford in Super Bowl 19. That team should have been the second undefeated team in the history of the league. We should. I mean, we lost to Pittsburgh during the regular season like a bunch of idiots not paying attention. But we were the first team to ever win 18 games in a season, and then Chicago did it again the next year. But that team was the best one I played on.
If you ever had to choose between Dwight Clark with the catch and John Taylor in your last Super Bowl game, which one would you choose if you had to? Which more was bittersweet?
Yeah, I'd have to. I mean, I love JT, and that catch means the world to me because obviously it's my last seconds on a professional field. But what DC did and that catch in that game at that time, what it did for that, I mean, the heck with the organization, what it did for the city of San Francisco, what it did for a truly downtrodden fan base. I mean, the 49er faithful were not a very large group after a back-to-back 2-14 years and then a 6-10 year. So we went from, winning 10 games in 3 years to suddenly winning 16 in the Super Bowl the next year. And it was all because of what we did in that one game and that one play by DC.
Randy, the one constant in those Super Bowls was your head coach Blair Walsh in those Super Bowls. I mean, what was it like being able to play under him and his work? I mean, he was somebody who, I mean, he's arguably one of the greatest coaches of all time. What was it like being under him as a head coach, being able to play for him?
It was nothing short of amazing and an honor. And, it was almost like working with like 3 different coaches because he was one of the guys when he first got there.
Yeah.
It was, we were in this whole thing together. We were going to turn it around. Everything was going to be, the way we wanted it. And then, we won that Super Bowl. And the next year in '82, we kind of betrayed a lot of trust, I think, as a team. We had guys kind of go off the reservation that year. And he had to become sort of more of a hard ass and be more aloof. And that was a different kind of guy. And then his last 2 or 3 years, he was even more aloof and kind of reclusive. But all that time, he designed plays up until the meeting the day of the game. Wow. He designed plays at halftime.
Wow.
I mean, he drove his coaches nuts. Because, most coaches, they're into quality, not quantity.
All right.
Bill didn't think that was important. Bill was more into, I want both. I want quality and I want quantity.
When was that first meeting? What was that first meeting like when you met Bill? When I know he had played or he was coaching at Stanford prior to him coming to San Francisco. He ended up going back to Stanford, but what was that first meeting like with Bill? And how did you just have a feeling that he was gonna just add to that kind of change in that really that beginning of this Niners dynasty?
Yeah. I mean, it was a look into kind of his personality that first meeting, because he could be really kind of brutally honest at times. And our first team meeting at Santa Clara for our training camp, he gets up there and he kind of welcomes everybody. Then he says, "You know what? I know what you're all thinking, because there's a bunch of you in here that have been around for 3 or 4 coaches. Because that was my 4th year. He was my 5th head coach."
Wow.
And he said, "You're just figuring you know what? We'll see if this guy works out. But if it doesn't work out, screw him. They'll fire him, and we'll just play for the next guy. And he says, I got some news for you. This is the worst roster and the worst team in the NFL. If you can't play for me, who in the hell are you going to play for? And it's kind of he let it kind of hang there for a second. Everybody's sort of looking around the room going, he might have a point, which he did. And we were pretty bad. But we had some good – he inherited some pretty good offensive talent.
Right.
And then he drafted a good bit of it too.
As far as, the two philosophies between Bill Walsh, you went in 2 Super Bowls, and your final year you won a Super Bowl with George Seifert. What was the 2 different philosophies like?
Yeah. Actually, all three were Bill for me.
Oh, they were? All right.
Yeah, because Bill retired the same time I did. And then the next year, George, they won it again down in New Orleans when they spanked the Denver Broncos.
Right.
Who just came out with some of the ugliest uniforms in creation.
Oh, yeah, the new third jersey.
Yeah, isn't that special?
Oh,
looks like it should come with clown paint.
It just seems like a lot of these teams anymore. It's just, all about marketing and making that money.
Yep.
Yeah, Randy, what do you think about, kind of speaking on this, what do you think about the Niners going back to the throwback look? Obviously, that's a special look for especially your era, and even in the 90s as well, when Steve Young was leading the Niners to championships during those years. I mean, what is it like to see now the team like hearkening back to its history and going back to the new look here in this modern age?
Yeah, that new look is sort of an homage to that fifth Super Bowl team that beat San Diego in the Super Bowl in Miami. The white pants and the different jerseys and all that. I think it's cool. You say, it's about marketing. I was just really happy they went back because they got lost in the desert there for a while on that uniform where they got a little out there, and they kind of went back to they went back to the more classic look, which I think is much more effective. It's nice to have something you can change up with.
Absolutely.
Well, didn't they have like that little gold trim around the numbers? I believe.
Not when I was there.
No, I mean years later.
Yeah, like that was the red and gold with the stripe, the black and the stripe on the leg, and the white pants, and it was a good look. It was a good look.
Dylan.
Because it looked like the old Niners uniforms from back in the 50s.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it was a lot of these teams are trying to mix it up for sure. They're trying to go into this modern age. Randy, kind of looking back at the years that you played and looking at the game now and how the game has changed. I mean, how do you think you would fare in this game? Do you think it would be different? Do you think you would have to adjust your game at all? I mean, like, how would you feel you would fare now in the way the game is played nowadays from where you played back in your day?
Well, first of all, I'd have to I'd have to do what my son did. My son played quarterback and played for Wake Forest and UCLA. And when he was a kid, he started working with a trainer and lifting in about the 8th and 9th grade. So I'd have probably had to do that too. And so I'd have been bigger. I'd have been heavier. I retired. I was 290. My guess is if I was under modern training techniques and whatnot, I'd have been at least that big, if not in the 300s, playing. That's kind of the reality of how it goes. The difference for me would have been they changed a lot of rules after my era, because it was kind of back then it was full contact karate. And, they changed a lot of rules, and they haven't stopped changing rules either. Most of these are for the offense. A lot of the rules they changed after I retired were towards safety and trying to make it a little fair to the defense. Because they took out the chop blocks, and they took out there was literally, people don't remember this, there was an area from tackle to tackle inside and 3 yards on either side of the ball. It was called the clip zone. You could legally clip somebody in there.
Right.
And it was pretty brutal.
Randy, as far as, yourself, playing center for 13 years, I mean, you look at guys like, me being an Eagles fan here in Philly, like you look at guys like Jason Kelsey and Jeff Saturday over the years.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how can I put this? Where would you rate, Jeff Saturday and Jason Kelsey as far as centers today?
I'll be honest, I think just like a lot of skill positions, it's hard to rank a lot of the linemen from different eras, apples to apples. I mean, Jason Kelsey's a big dude. A big dude.
Right.
Jeff Saturday is what, 6'3", 6'4", and was probably maybe 275, 280. Jason Kelsey has 275 for lunch.
Right.
So yeah, it's a whole different style of game. To his credit, he moves as well as anybody. I mean, you can go back to the Dwight Stevensons or the Jim Langers or whoever you want to talk about that were great centers that could get out and go. That to me is the one thing that's universal. That's one thing that transcends decades and eras, is linemen that can move are valuable, because linemen that can move can get in front of skill guys that can move better.
When you go back to like the days of the steel curtain, like a lot of people say Mike Webster was undersized.
He was. Webby was 6'2",
played a long time.
275. The difference with him though is he had arms that looked like legs. He was yoked.
Randy, when you were at UCLA, I want to ask this. I want to go back to your college days. When you went to UCLA and playing in college now, I mean, seeing the way college has even developed over the past several years, and seeing UCLA now and such. I mean, what was it like to be a part of those teams those years? You got to win the Rose Bowl in '76 in your final year. I mean, what was it like going to UCLA and playing college ball there? And what is it like to see now the team, and how do you feel about the team this year as well?
I'm excited for them. They have to be really excited, anticipating going to the Big Ten and competing with them. It'll be completely different than the Pac-12.
Yeah,
the Pac-12 was just a mess. I mean, when you can't figure out what time of day you should play your games, you have some stuff happen to you that maybe you deserve. When you play games with your best teams that 2/3 of the country can't watch because they're in bed, and you wonder why your players, CMC, when he was at Stanford, he should have been an automatic Heisman winner. But shit, nobody saw him play. Right. So, yeah, I think the Bruins have got to be really excited, the NSC, and about going to the Big Ten and competing at that level. And it's going to be incumbent upon them from a recruiting standpoint and an NIL standpoint. That's some deep water as far as competing and recruiting when you're going against Michigan and Ohio State and teams like that. So best of luck. I think Deshaun Foster will do a good job.
Just being from California, I mean, or I shouldn't say being from California, you were born in New York, but you got to play your entire career in California, and you don't see that a lot of times with athletes nowadays. You see guys going out to get money. I mean, how special was that to be able to stay in California your entire career, go and play high school football in California, then go into playing collegiate football and then obviously getting to play your entire pro career and with the 49ers. I mean, how special was that to be able to be out in California to play your entire career? I mean, it must have been pretty awesome to have family and people nearby you to be able to watch all your games throughout your career.
Yeah, I mean, if you're from the East Coast or the Midwest, I'm sure you occasionally watch SC, UCLA, or the Rose Bowl, and it's 74 degrees and sunny and beautiful and clear blue skies and all that. That's like 2/3 of the year where I grew up. So, obviously when I went to San Francisco and suddenly, my rookie year, we were playing games at Minnesota and Cleveland and places like that, I was like, man, you can have this snow. I was to the bone a California kid. I didn't want nothing to do with that white stuff. But yeah, it was a great time. I played for two very good coaches, in Pepper Rogers and Dick Vermeil. I had a great offensive line coach in Terry Donahue. Before he became the head coach, he was the O-line coach at UCLA. He was incredible. And I played with, a bunch of really good players and lifelong friends. So, I made the right choice. It was between UCLA and Nebraska, who that year had won the national championship when I was getting recruited. But, Donahue and Pepper kind of sold me on the idea of being on the ground level of something special. It took 4 years, but they were right.
Right. As far as we have some comments coming in, Sean Kilrain checking in. Thanks for checking in with us. Sean says, I see you're on Instagram. You love the barbecue. What is your go-to food to put on the grill? You look like a certified cook.
Yeah, I've got some consistence. I love briskets. That's sort of the main dog for most barbecue people. Anybody that smokes meat starts with briskets, ribs, pork bellies, pork shoulders. You name it, I can do it. I love doing it. It's a lot of fun, and my family, I know they consider themselves lucky because I tend to spoil them with a lot of good meat.
Randy, is Miller Lite still providing you with beverages when you're smoking your meat out there?
No, unfortunately not. They're not. But that Miller Lite commercial was kind of a good news, bad news deal. It was a great deal after I retired. I made decent money. I got to meet all those Miller Lite all-star guys making the all-star commercials and the other stuff. But when I got labeled an all-pro center in that first commercial, from that time on, everyone assumes all I ever played was center. And they kind of, I made all NFC, and I was second team all-pro at center, but I was first team all-pro 4 times at guard. And Pro Bowl at guard and all that, but that got lost in the shuffle. That's the power of the media out there. But Miller Lite tastes great, less filling.
What was it like working with guys like Bubba Smith and Rodney Dangerfield and Bob Uecker? I mean, that had to be hilarious.
It's funny. I mean, Rodney was funny, obviously. I got to see him in a few shows too, but Uecker was and still is. He is side splitting funny. He is hilarious. So you had Uecker and all those other guys and John Madden and No, it was a fun experience. I mean, it was. You look at that script and say, how the hell are they going to make a commercial with 80 guys? It seemed like, but they managed to do a pretty good job.
That must have been hilarious being on that set with all those guys at one time.
Oh, it was. It definitely was.
Randy, when you transitioned over from football to broadcasting, I broadcast myself, so I enjoy getting to talk to people who've been in the broadcasting industry. For you, what was that transition like going from playing to then being in the NFL? I imagine that being in the commercial probably definitely helped with, just being in front of the camera and being on TV. And you obviously got to be on camera a lot during your NFL career. But I mean, like, what was that transition like going from being a football player to then becoming and stepping into the broadcast booth?
Well, I have no delusions. I've been lucky. I played 13 years in the NFL, so I was a football player first. And then in '89, I started broadcasting. I did NFL games for 20 years. And then I've done college now for 12, 13 years. So it's something, once you're into it, you realize that if you can stay in it, you're really, really lucky. Because everybody, it seems like that plays, tries it. But it's something you either can do or you really can't do. Or you can learn to be okay. But the people that are born to do it, it's pretty obvious, when you listen to them talk. It's something that's, it's cool. It's like when Tony Romo left Dallas and CBS hired him, and you listened to him on TV and you went, oh, okay, that guy's pretty good. And that's just it, because sometimes it's some of the greatest players that have ever played have tried to do TV and, haven't really been able to catch the fire or catch people's attention.
Randy, is there any particular games that you did work that stand out to you that most memorable?
The games I really, really enjoyed. I didn't get a chance to do very many Niner games, unfortunately, because CBS was rather committed to the fact that they didn't want me to be biased. But in the old days of doing, because I was at the NBC too for a few years when CBS lost football.
Right.
The old days of John Elway and Dan Marino and Boomer Esiason and, those guys on the AFC side, that was fun. I mean, that was really fun. And the old Skins teams, when Gibbs was there,
right,
that was special. Anytime you got a chance to do a Redskin game at RFK, people forget they had a whole section of stands, which is the opposite side from the broadcast booth, right where the Redskins sat, where their bench was. Mm-hmm. That damn part of the stands had come off the ground when people started bouncing up and down. That was a big piece of stadium to be coming off the ground.
Right.
It was very cool. I don't know. It's hard to say one particular game, because I was lucky enough to do, like I said, about 20 years worth and a lot of playoff games and everything else.
Actually, we do have one more question coming in from Sean Kilrain again. Do you see the Niners trading Brandon Ayuk? If so, who do you think he may get traded to?
If he gets traded, it's to the luckiest team in the NFL, whoever that is. Right. And everybody in the building in Santa Clara need their freaking head examined if they trade Brandon Ayuk. That guy is special. And guys like that don't come along real often. Is the salary cap an issue for them? Yes, it is. There's no doubt about it. But I think John Lynch is going to move heaven and earth with the help of Jed York and everybody there in Santa Clara to keep Brandon Ayuk exactly where he is.
Just had a quick college question. I forgot that you were coached by Dick Vermeil in college. I mean, what was, just very familiar with Dick Vermeil being the Eagles coach here in Philly back, late. So, turn that whole team around, getting the Eagles, the Super Bowl 15, changed the whole culture here. What was it like just playing for Dick Vermeil?
Dick was very intense, very loyal. He was uber aggressive. That was the 2 years I had some of the most fun I've ever had playing football, especially my senior year, because we got really good and upset the number one team in the country in the Rose Bowl and all that other fun stuff. But he was so intense. He would, everybody makes fun of him because he cries on occasion. He gets very emotional, and You know, I've never played with a coach or for a coach that truly cared for his players as much as Dick did. I mean, my parents were getting Christmas cards from he and Carroll.
Wow.
For years after I left UCLA. I mean, it was nuts. And
Wow.
You'd see him on the road, and he'd give you a big hug and a kiss. Last year, he and Carroll came by the Navy SMU game and came up to the booth, and it was like old home week. They were both hugging and everything else.
Right.
I'd do anything for Dick Vermeil.
Oh, I was maybe about 9 or 10 when he resigned as Eagles head coach, and just seeing him just break down, you know, at the time being burned out. And just as you said, an emotional guy. I mean, you know, you don't hide your feelings. I mean, there's, you know, everybody's like, yeah, macho, but hey, the man's real. I always heard he was a gentleman. You know, I know today he has the vineyard in Napa Valley. He has his own wine and stuff, and just always heard great things about Dick Vermeil.
He was the best, and he had a very amazing staff. I talked about Terry Donahue was on that staff. Carl Peterson was on that staff. Lynn Stiles was on that staff. Some of the coaches, Bill McPherson, who was a D-line coach at San Francisco for about 20 years. Billy Matthews, who coached running backs at San Francisco for about 15 years. He was there. You look at that 76 team and that team picture, and it's almost like a who's who of college and professional coaches, including Dick Tomey, who, you know, was at Hawaii and Arizona forever.
As far as your days with the Niners, wasn't Mike Holmgren an assistant under Bill Walsh then, or was that later on?
That was then. There was a whole, I guess, just a string of coaches. You know, there was Hackett was there, and Holmgren was there, and Shanahan was there, and I mean, just go down the list. It was pretty crazy. Because it got to the point where the offensive coordinators would be there for like a year or two, and then they'd go be a head coach somewhere else.
Right. Just a lot of disciples under the Bill Walsh tree.
Yep. Right. One of the more famous trees out there.
Exactly. I remember, of course, Andy Reid being a disciple of Mike Holmgren, John Gruden, Ray Rhodes.
Ray played in San Francisco.
That's right.
And coached DBs for Bill.
Right. Boots.
Randy. Oh, my bad, Fuji.
Go ahead. No, I was just saying Steve Mariucci being a disciple of Bill Walsh as well.
Randy, when you were on those 80s teams, you know, the Niners dynasty is just filled with so many great rivalries. But was there a rivalry when you stepped out on the field and you were going up against one of those rivalry teams? Was there just that one rivalry that really always stood out in your mind whenever you guys got to play against that team?
I would say the NFC East with the Giants and the Skins were some of the least pleasant and most fun games at times. Philly to a degree, but those two guys, the Rams back then were pretty good. Dallas, we only had one really, Titanic type game with them because we wore their ass out every other time after we started winning. But it wasn't until back in the 90s after Jimmy got there that, then they turned the tables. But, I would say those two teams, the Skins and the Giants, were probably those were fun games. I mean, that was LT and that was Riggins and that was Theismann, and go down the list of all the great players they had on those two teams, as well as the Rams. The Rams had the misfortune of having a lot of great football players and really, really good teams. At the same time, we were better. So,
Sorry, Food.
No, go ahead.
I just have one more question for you, Randy, though. I wanted to ask, with your broadcaster career, you've been doing it for 20 plus years now, and you've gotten to do a lot of different games. But what does your preparation look like going into a game? I know you've been doing it for years, but every game you got to prepare, you got to get ready for each matchup. I mean, what does your preparation look like when it comes to getting ready for a game you're about to broadcast?
Well, the good news is because of Wi-Fi and the proliferation of computers, you don't have to carry around 10 pounds of newspaper articles like you used to, and stats and everything else. But, you've got to read a fairly prodigious amount during the week up on the teams,
Right.
both teams. For me, I watch from this year, let's say the year I'm in, I'll watch 3 or 4 games for each team that year. And sometimes I'll go back and watch the games that maybe they played the year before or further back if some of the players are still the same. So, no, it's a lot of, from a time standpoint, it's a lot of time. And, it's doing games on the weekends is one thing, but starting about 10, 12 years ago, I started doing inside college football for CBS, which covers everything in college football. So it's like the early part of the week is everybody, and the later part of the week is the 2 teams I have to do that week. And trust me, the 2 teams later on that week is a lot easier than the first 2 or 3 days.
Right. Oh. Well, Randy, we appreciate you coming on Fuji's Phil. We had a blast. Thank you. We'd like to have you back, in the near future. And, looking forward to the draft coming up this week. So will you be doing, I'm sure you've done your research on that, or will you will you be doing like any broadcasts or shows?
This last week, we did 6 shows on Tuesday and Wednesday. So those have been running last week, and they'll keep running this week. So it's one of the things. I mean, ESPN basically owns the draft and the NFL network.
Right.
So they suck all the oxygen out of the room. We just get to get our shots in early.
Right. Well, thank you again. Dylan and I appreciate you coming on. Have a good night, and looking forward to the draft.
My pleasure. Anytime. Just give me a yell.
Okay, right. Thank you. Have a good night.
Thanks, Randy. Appreciate it. Awesome. Thanks so much to Randy Cross for taking some time to jump on, 3-time Super Bowl champion. Some great stuff we got to get into with him. We're going to continue on with the show. We're going to take it up to the top of the hour. Fuge, it's, as you mentioned, NFL draft's coming up this Thursday. It's an exciting night. The Chicago Bears will be on the clock with the number 1 pick. We definitely know they will be most likely taking a quarterback here at the number 1 pick. But it's about kind of what's going on with the rest of the draft. That's going to, I think, be really fascinating, especially past Chicago. It's looking like it might be very quarterback heavy to kick off the NFL draft this year.
According to a lot of these mock drafts, I'm not really a college guy, but I dive into the draft as it gets closer. As far as you being a Tampa Bay Bucs season ticket holder or a Bucs fan, as far as your team, what are your weaknesses down there?
Looking at our weaknesses, I would say offensive line is probably our biggest weakness, given the fact that, we've lost a lot of our guys the last handful of years. Ali Marpet retired, Ryan Jensen just retired. It's a new offensive line that we have. There's not really many guys who were on that Super Bowl team. And obviously that was 4 to 5 years ago. So we're starting to kind of age out now from that Super Bowl era with Brady. But I would say offensive line is going to be probably our biggest need. The thing is, Food, we're so balanced on the roster. We can never have too many defensive players. Anybody who can make a big splash on the defense is huge. The Bucs have always been known to be a defensive-heavy team, and I wouldn't mind seeing them. And Todd Bowles is a very defensive-minded coach as well. So maybe he goes that route and decides to take a defensive player. But, Wouldn't mind a defensive player. Maybe wouldn't even wouldn't mind a receiver. You don't know how long Mike Evans or Chris Godwin are going to be in Tampa. I mean, Evans just signed a good contract, but Godwin.
That was a 2-year deal, right?
See.
$50 million.
Yeah. So.
And how long's Godwin under? Well,
I'm not sure Godwin. I think he did. He definitely did resign, but I mean, you just don't know. You don't know what the Bucs are going to do. I think there are a few open holes, and I think overall we're pretty structured with the way our team is, but we'll see when the draft comes. I might be there at the draft party on Thursday.
Nice. I mean, the Eagles actually, I think it was rumored today that I think it was Adam Schefter reporting that Howie Roseman's trying to move up here in Philly. So I wouldn't be shocked Howie, the master of wheeling, dealing, at least trades. Hopefully, I don't know. I mean, Vic Fangio coming in, defensive coordinator. I think he'll be in Howie's ear as far as who to take, which makes me a little more relaxed that that's possible because, Vic Fangio, the new defensive coordinator, Kellen Moore, the new offensive coordinator. I mean, I won't be shocked that the Eagles do go after a receiver.
Yeah, especially with all the A.J. Brown reports as well.
Well, I mean, I don't know. Sometimes you never know. Here's the thing. I mean, the rumor is the Eagles would take a $38 million cap hit getting rid of A.J. Brown this year. And, a couple years ago during that Carson Wentz contract, luckily they got out of it with the Colts, but they took a nice hit with that. So I think right now the Eagles got about $30 million in cap space, but who knows what Howie's, he pulled off DeAndre Swift last year. He pulled off A.J. Brown 2 years ago. I mean, it's all eyes are going to be on Philly. It's kicking off, just about 71 hours, whatever it is, come Thursday night in Detroit. So it's always a fun time at the draft. I usually do go to the Eagles draft party every year, but I wasn't aware the tickets, came and went. So, it's always one of the best, amazing times of the sports calendar.
It's really the kickback off to the NFL. I mean, it really kind of is like the first true big event of the new NFL season.
Well, yeah. I mean, besides, free agency, it's everybody's all jacked up to see who's going to throw the bags of money around day one. And, the Eagles they got some questions on that offensive line. Cam Jargon's big shoes to fill. Tyler Steen's supposed to be the new right guard, but I don't think that's a slam dunk. I mean, in another way, I wouldn't be shocked if the Eagles do go offensive lineman or edge rusher. You got rid of Hassan Reddick, traded him to the Jacks, 27 sacks the last 2 years, and just, it's big shoes to fill.
Absolutely.
Guy was, one of your best defensive players, if not the best on the defensive side of the football. So
yeah, no, I agree.
We'll be as I said, all eyes will be, on the clock on the 22nd pick, or I wouldn't be shocked to see how we move up.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting draft. It absolutely will be. Let's take a look around some other Philly sports going on. We had the Philadelphia Phillies just finish out their series with the Chicago White Sox this past weekend. It was Philly Fanatic's birthday on Sunday. Fuji, I don't know. You didn't buy him a birthday present, did you?
Nah, not this year.
I will say something interesting the Phillies did, though. This was kind of cool. They wore those Philly Fanatic BP hats during the game. His expression there told the entire story.
I'm not.
I thought that was a cool look. It was cool for the day. I understood.
It's just the Fanatic, but to me, it's for the little kids. Not that it has to be, but it's just anything with the Philly Fanatic on it's just, to me, just for the children.
I understand.
I know I'm wrong, but That's just my opinion. Just like some people love the City Connect jerseys, other people don't. I mean, that I'm kind of up and down with it. I mean, the hat's nice, but it's just, everybody has their own preference.
Absolutely. No, I agree.
And the Phils winning tonight 7-0 over the Cincinnati Reds. As far as in the NBA right now, your Magic are losing 80-65 to Cleveland.
You don't have to remind me.
And Sixers and the Knicks are tied 55-all. So
yeah,
hopefully the Sixers can tie this series, bring it back to Philly. I mean, I know your Magic are just getting back into the NBA finals. God. NBA playoffs.
I would love that.
After so many years, but
yeah, it's been a few years since we've been in the playoffs. It's been since 2020, and yeah, we'll see where the Magic go. It's going to be an interesting run to the finish, and Jamal Mosley put together a great group this year. I was very proud of what the Magic did, and no matter what, I mean, we had a strong year this year. We made the playoffs, and we didn't have to go through the play-in tournament, so I'm very happy about that. That's more than I could ever ask for my team. So.
Well, it was about a year or two ago. You were typing up your Magic.
Yeah,
I remember.
I think the team had a lot of they were trending forward. We'll say that, and then with Paulo coming in, he's changed the culture. And that's happened with the Magic every time we've gotten the number one pick, Fuji. If you look at our picks from previous years where we've drafted number one, we've had Shaq. We go on to the NBA Finals. Dwight Howard comes in, go on to the NBA Finals. So maybe Paulo Banchero will bring the same success, and a city that truly needs it. I mean, it would be incredible to have the NBA Finals back in Orlando because it's a team that has had success. It's been a bit. So,
I mean, you look at free agency, big markets.
It's a tough market to bring in free agency, Fuji. It's tough. It really is in Orlando. It's a shame. Sure. It's a shame because it's looked at as a retirement home for a lot of players. So it's unfortunate that it's the way it is, but we'll see. We'll see.
All right. Well, I want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight for episode 3 of Fuji's Phil.
We got a few more comments coming in, though, before we go. We had a few coming in. 3027 on the fly said LOL. And great job. Very interesting. So we appreciate the support.
Thank you. Thanks again, Sean Kilrain checking in, too, with 327 on the fly. Any last comments or things you want to dive into here, Mr. Spaulding?
Nah, it was Randy Cross. Thanks so much for having him on. I forgot to play the video. I was gonna play it before he left. I thought he would have got a kick out of it. We had a Miller Lite video. I removed it from our thing, but we had the Miller Lite commercial that he had. So if he ever comes back on again, we'll
have him back on. Maybe we'll have him back on around kickoff of the NFL season.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's an exciting week. Playoffs basketball going on, playoff hockey going on. We got the NFL draft this weekend. A lot of good stuff there. A little bit of racing going on for myself. So yeah, there's a lot of exciting stuff going on in the world of sports. It's go crazy still to think. Like, remember a few years ago we were all shut down, and now sports is as hot as it's ever been.
Back up and running full steam.
Absolutely. So.
Well, for Dylan, we want to thank everybody tuning in. Sean and 327 on the fly for your comments. We'll be back on next Monday night, 8 p.m.
Yep.
Everybody out there, be safe, be healthy. Call a friend, call a loved one you haven't talked to. I'm signing off tonight for Fuji's Phil, for Dylan Spaulding. Mike Fuji, everybody have a good week. Have a good night, and God bless. Have a good night.